Magic makers. I'm really excited about this conversation. I know I'm excited about them all, but this is like one that I feel that a lot of my conversations with clients always boil down to, and it's about body image, loving our body, loving our 40 something body, even when it doesn't give us what we want, even when it's not, as we call, quote unquote, behaving. This is what we're talking about, and I have Nicole Meline here, and we are talking all about how do we connect to our body now? How do we connect to our body in our past? How do we apply like a nice spiritual approach to our fitness? Not in a woo-woo way, but more like how do we start to give ourselves grace and understanding about where we are today? So, Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I feel like I'm just in the family.
I know Nicole and I were having like little like pre-show banter, which I absolutely love. Like the worst is like when you try to have pre-show banter with people and they sit there and smile at you like you don't speak English. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a long hour.
I was just listening to like literally right before we jumped on to a recent episode on the We Can Do Hard Things podcast with
Yeah.
Glennon Doyle. And I think it's two episodes ago, the episode's called something like Are Older Women Irrelevant? And
Mm,
and Glennon was telling this amazing story about how, just kind of like what has shifted for her in starting to feel what a lot of women feel in our 40s, maybe,
right.
sometimes earlier than that, maybe a little, sometimes later than that, but where there is like, you hear often women talk about kind of like becoming invisible as we
Yeah.
age. And she was talking about the like kind of all of the blessings of that, like really taking it realistically and saying, like, yes, this is actually, I feel this becoming my experience in certain ways. And that now her vision is to just kind of become this increasingly invisible woman who's just sitting on the couch with all of her 40 plus girlfriends just cackling.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
And we were talking about like Chalene Johnson earlier in our pre-show, and I feel like one of the things that as you get to that 40 something, I think about like what my mom was at 40 something compared to how women are now at 40 something. And I don't feel like they ever said, you know what, this isn't the life I want. Like I don't ever feel
Mm.
like there was that like might have like rose up with like the Equal Rights Amendment and that kind of thing. But I feel like when they hit 40, they weren't like, no, we're not going to lay down. Look, we still got stuff to do.
Yeah, I do think that that's also this kind of shift. I think there's been a number of shifts, it seems like, in the last 10 years. First of all, the conversation around menopause, which
Yes.
basically didn't exist,
Zero.
connected to this like growing awareness of, oh, so much of medical research has
Mm.
been on men,
Yep.
right? And there's like that whole reality that we're aware of and we're talking about in a way that we haven't really before. And I think also the rise of social media, which means that anyone who wants a platform can build a platform,
Yes. Yes.
so that
Yes.
like we're starting to hear from all these marginalized voices, like the voices that the establishment wouldn't choose. And
Right.
so I think women, like, what Glennon was saying about women kind of becoming increasingly invisible culturally, like all of a sudden now, I mean, I intentionally follow super badass older women, and
Yes.
you can tell there is this kind of like, maybe it's after 40, 45, whatever, maybe it's with menopause, but just like fewer F's to give, you know,
Oh,
like a
yes.
sharper bullshit meter. And these women that are just speaking with this kind of freedom and joy. There's like there's a different kind of joy I think that we can come into, as we lay aside, which is not an easy thing to do. It's like this process that's full of a lot of grief and trauma and everything, like lay aside the expectations that we maybe had, especially for
Mm.
our bodies, or hopes that we had, and, decide finally that we are no longer care, right?
Right.
And kind of then like ask that question of, um, what is wellness for me?
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah. And I think a big part of that too, I'd love to chat about today, is the role of pleasure.
Oh,
Because I,
girl. Girl.
yeah, good, good, good. it's like we, I feel in my own body when I think about what I should be doing in the
Hmm.
course of a day in terms of exercise, strength training, the way I should be eating. And I feel
Yes.
in my body this like, this like resistance to it that it's it and I think there's this really interesting dance between a discipline that I choose because I
Hmm.
want the long-term pleasure. Like I'm investing in
Yes.
long-term pleasure, right? But then that's got to be balanced with the joy and the freedom of short-term pleasure that like when I choose how I'm going to eat in a day or how I'm going to move, it's like a blend of those two things, right? Like part of it has to be it's because this is what my true self wants right now. You know?
Right, right. And I think you hit the nail on the head with joy. For
Mm,
years, we were do this. And it was a very regimented process. Like if you wanted to look a certain way, here were the rules. And if you broke the rules, you weren't going to get the results. And now, like Glennon said, like we're out there and we're like, you know what? Screw the rules. Like, how come I can't do me? Like that rule, like rule X doesn't work for me. So I'm not doing that no more. Like, and how many women can actually start to stand up and be like, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to do that one anymore.
And I think that it's important to have a lot of grace for ourselves in that,
Mm,
like, for really good reasons, it
yes.
might take us until 40 plus to actually like begin experimenting with that kind of freedom or ask those kinds of questions. And I feel like I've had my own, I'm still obviously I'm still in relationship to the patriarchy, but like it's been like a 10-year journey of even understanding how I've been shaped by
Mm,
a lot of those forces. And part of um part of like rejecting them, there's this level of grief in it because
yeah.
I have to acknowledge maybe some things that it stole from me, like
Yes.
some things that I didn't get to experience, because I
You gave
believed
into
in
it.
certain, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. And so I try to have a lot of grace, for even like parents or older people who like I understand that for them to maybe question some of these assumptions that they've been working in of how it should be
Yeah.
would mean would mean acknowledging that like they maybe lost 10, 20, 30 years of their lives to
Right.
decisions that they otherwise would like that's a huge thing,
It,
to even like contemplate.
and it's easy to get angry at that. Like it's easy to look
Yeah.
back and be like,
Yeah.
it's easy to say, oh my God, I wasted time, or it kind of makes you wish like I woke up sooner.
Yep.
And I know, and I'm gonna weave this into here with this sweat question. And I know like both you and I worked very hard in the fitness industry. And in the fitness industry, things were you had to look a certain way.
Yes.
And certain companies told you to look a certain way,
Hmm.
or us in our minds, I told us we had to look a certain way, or I wasn't going to be the go-to instructor or the go-to trainer.
Hmm.
And I just think about how many times I, banged my head up against the wall to comply. And now I look back and I'm like, God damn, that was a lot of hard work for what?
Yeah. 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 Well, I think that the fitness industry in so many ways could be like one of the most toxic spaces. And it's thank goodness it's getting so much better. I
Yes.
think like there's these conversations happening. And again, it's like because of social media, it's because people who finally want to say something different, offer something different now can. There's ways to build platforms and communities. It doesn't have to kind of all be one way. But I think that, oh my goodness, just like, I mean, just the fact that you would look at, most instructors were like under 35,
Yes.
often even under 30,
Mm-hmm.
and their bodies are, very different. They're working very differently than folks that are older, right? Or just like I think even the simple, I never even thought this question working I worked in the fitness industry in New York City that was like right when the boutique fitness boom was really
Yeah.
happening, where like like as an industry, it was being taken seriously, right? Like you could really build a successful studio business. And um, I think that like I never even thought about the question of what, like, how much does size like matter to health? Like a
Yes.
healthy body at any size. Like I feel like we hear that some
Here,
version of
but
that
back
phrase
then,
now.
I want to say,
No,
if we
yeah.
go back 10 years, I don't
Uh-huh.
think that was said.
Right. Yeah.
If you look at it, and that's probably right around the rise of boutique fitness. If you
Yeah.
look at all of the boutique fitnesses that have like popped up, and if you look at kind of their cast of characters,
Hmm.
they were all, like you said, 20-ish, early 30s, and they all had a very similar body type.
Hmm.
And then you felt like if I went to class X, I could get said body type.
Yes. Yeah.
And there was no ever talk of muscle building. There was no talk
Mm.
of, hey, give yourself a rest day. It was all like, go all in, come to
Yeah.
the studio every damn day, and you can look like Susie, whoever your favorite fitness instructor was.
Yeah, and of course we've got to acknowledge the like financial motivation.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're creating unobtainable standards, people are going to continually be reaching to obtain them, right? So like there's a gym maybe has an interest a gym has an interest in people not taking a rest day, right?
No, you don't.
Yeah.
I want you to be I when I was in fitness, I remember we had a consultant come in and talk about like how as trainers we can make more money. And he said that gyms should be the third place in people's lives. And he said home, work, gym. And he said that's the Starbucks model. And he said think about Starbucks. He said how many people that's their stop, and if you notice where Starbucks is, I live in Boston, if you notice where Starbucks are, they were at every entrance to a T stop. Every entrance there was a Starbucks, and it was like you had to trip over yourself to not find a Starbucks getting on the T. And like I know you lived in New York City, and I'm sure they did the same strategy
Yeah,
in
yeah,
New York
next to the
City,
subway
but next to
entrances.
Subway. I mean, I grew up in New York, so it's like I could have Starbucks, or I could have the cart with the dirty hot dog water make me a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I think that, well, it's, like that guy saying that gyms being the third space, the way that I think about fitness, like fitness studios now or gyms now, is I'm way more interested in creating community in those spaces.
Yes, yes.
Like, I think that's how I think that that is just, it's like we hear from so many places about this epidemic of loneliness, that
Mm,
all of these forces of COVID and remote work and our ability to travel much more, which means like we're way more mobile. We stay in one place for longer or shorter periods of time. So it's like we're not investing as deeply in building community. And I think this is also very much related to just like life after 40.
yes,
Um, Friendships are harder. I think like those deep quality friendships are
yes.
harder to form for lots of reasons. And we're maybe like a lot more guarded. Um, and we're less like willing to just be vulnerable right off the bat with people. And so I love like the way that I teach now, I'm trying to think more and more about how do I make this experience, like if we're going to come together in person and go through all the inconvenience of that,
Yes, yes.
it's gotta, or even online, right? Like it's gotta be this moment of real connection,
Right.
because I think it's like when we think about the body standards that we're sort of skirting around talking about, that women have lived under our whole
Hmm.
freaking lives. And if 40 is often, there's this like portal, I think of it as, where we've got this opportunity to question everything. And right. And so it's like that sense of, oh, I'll get to that someday. Girl, now it's today.
Right.
Like we're
Like
here.
the
Yeah.
portal's open. Step
The
in.
portal is open. Yes, exactly. And I think that like, if anyway, if we it's this invitation to ask all these huge questions, I think, about ourselves. And I guess what I was getting at is that when we ask ourselves all of those, when we look at all those body standards that we had, maybe it was a goal weight, or it was like a
Yes.
goal hip measurement or waist measurement or something, pant size, running time. Uh, I think performance goals are often different because those can be more about like, oh, I'm curious about how strong my body could actually get or like how
Right.
efficient it could get. But I think what's really important for us to recognize is that all of those appearance based goals, those are really about belonging.
Yeah.
Those are about
Mm,
community. It's like,
yeah.
I only want to be that size because that size is going to help me belong, right? That
Yeah.
size is going to like bring me the friendships or maybe also the opportunities or whatever. But what does it look like if our space, like fitness spaces, gyms, studios, or even online communities are, way more focused on creating this kind of community which we've been craving all along, which all that
Right.
stuff was actually about, right?
Yeah.
That's what's really interesting to me is to kind of think about like what are the questions that were under, what are the longings that were underneath the standards? Like what are the real longings?
It's interesting. I just recorded another podcast up like an hour ago before you, and one of the women said about values, and we have to look at our values. And so if you think about one of her values was belonging. And so if how are you looking at belonging? Are you looking at belonging that you look like the members of your tribe? Or are you looking at belonging as like happiness? Like, what does belonging get to you by being a member of said, fitness community?
Yeah. One of I love Jen Hatmaker. Go follow her on Instagram. She's hilarious and awesome. She always talks about like looking at any community that you're interested in being a part of or are a part of by default, like a work community or something. It's important to ask, what is the currency of belonging here? Isn't
Oh,
that good?
yeah, that's a good.
Yeah.
You're
Like
right.
yeah, what's the currency of belonging? And Brene Brown makes this beautiful distinction between fitting in and belonging. And she says that fitting in is adhering to the standards, like literally
Yeah.
fitting the standards, right? Whereas belonging is being loved and chosen for who you are, like not having to conform, right? It's this interesting kind of difference.
Right. And I love that. That's a good segue because as you were saying about like what's the currency and for some people the currency is like you have to wear Lululemon pants and
Yeah.
all these other things. And the other thing I was thinking is that many people to be, if they're looking at the currency as maybe the leanness of themselves, they get into the mindset of I'll love myself when.
Yes.
Right. And so, what's some like tough love advice that you would give for someone who is in that kind of like, I belong to said club and, I love myself when, whatever it is that they're thinking they need to do.
I love that you're asking this question. I It's very rare, first of all, but I think it's also less like becoming less and less rare to see a woman walking in her power,
Yeah.
loving herself. I'll think about like at the beach or the pool. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's where most of
Like,
us get the most like,
yeah, exactly. Like, have you ever been on a beach and you see a woman who doesn't have that quote unquote conventionally beautiful, I don't even want to say that, like, whatever, like conventionally approved body type,
right,
okay?
right, right,
And she's older or she's a different size or whatever. She's wrinkly, she's cellulite. Have you ever seen a woman, in this kind of like uncookie cutter body just in joy, like in love, in a bikini, just like
just out
feeling
there.
herself, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't think there's anything more beautiful. And, when I think about like being in different public spaces or something, again, like seeing a woman who is like just expressing herself, whether it's through fashion or she is like she's standing tall, right? I love this phrase, she's embodying herself fully.
Yeah.
And I think that not only is that, I mean, there's nothing more beautiful, but it's contagious. Like
Yeah.
she's giving herself a gift and she's giving every woman on that beach a gift to
Right.
say, yeah, like Anne Lamott has this wonderful line. I don't know if I'm gonna get it exactly right. The writer Anne Lamott, she says, don't get to the end of your life and, you know, grieve all the oceans that you didn't jump into, or like whatever ways that you wanted to enjoy your body because your belly was just a little too big or jiggly. Like all the things that you didn't allow yourself because you yourself disqualified yourself,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like, and we do, and we're taught to. I think that um we know like in any, I think like in any relationship, that conditional love creates fear.
Yeah.
Like it creates this, it's this like vibe of judgment, and it's fear, like whether it's in like between like us and our pets or our kids or friends or partners, like there's we can't fully trust conditional love, right? And I think that when we just decide to love ourselves, and that is this, kind of dance or this blend of the chosen discipline that's going to give us the long delayed pleasure.
Yeah.
And then also the indulgence in our short term, right now pleasures, right? It is this dance. But when we decide to just love ourselves for exactly who we are, we're also, I think this is really interesting, like we are creating in our bodies, in our nervous systems, the kind of safety that's going to
Yeah.
allow us to live our most courageous and creative lives,
Yeah.
right? Like it's when you feel safe that you take the big risks
Mm.
creatively, professionally, relationally. And so it's really helpful for me to think in terms of experiments. Like if I think about changing my whole entire life forever, that's too much.
Yes. Yes.
If I
Yes.
think about what if this week I experimented with loving on myself like I would grandmother myself. If I was my own grandmother, how would I talk to myself? How would I think about myself? Um, what if I just try that this week and
Right.
see what shifts, right? I think that's a little door to freedom.
When you said that, you're out pool, beach, and that woman who's just like, hey, this is Sharon, love it or lump it.
Yeah,
And, I'm hoping that as, we kind of move forward, we're more like, go you, Sharon,
totally.
versus like, oh, Sharon, like really? I want more women to be like, you know what, God love you. And ask yourself, like, what's something that you could be brave? It might be like you've never seen yourself naked and you just spend time naked in your mirror. Or drink coffee naked. Oh no, that's probably hot. No, so don't do that. Don't drink coffee naked. That's an accident waiting to happen.
Drink champagne naked.
Yeah, drink something cold naked so that way you don't risk a burn. But like, being able to just like feel okay in my body. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's also what we're seeing as like more women age. And they're like, you know what? I don't care. Like this, we talk about pleasure. Drinking champagne naked on my couch brings me joy. If brings you joy with the shades open, all right. But no judgments. But it's like just instead of asking yourself who's going to be the judge, even if it's you, just taking that experiment to be like, I'm just going to stand naked and put my towel off 5 minutes.
Yeah. I I love that image. And I think even I think that's a fun little homework assignment to make a list of practices that are like maybe sort of scandalize you a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Of like to love yourself scandalously. But I think that our conditioning has been so extreme
Yes.
that, yeah, guess what? We might have to be kind of extreme in deconditioning it. And it's amazing right now to see. I feel like on social media, I've seen this rise of, I would just say, like, rise of the feminine, rise of the divine
Yes.
feminine, like women really, and it's probably important that it's often like women communities where there's safety. It's
Right.
like outside it, what does it feel like to be in our bodies outside of the male gaze, right? And like to not be measuring ourselves by that. Um, but it's happening, like all
Right.
of this kind of feminine embodiment. I think that we are reclaiming a lot of what has been stolen from us.
Yes.
And it can be, a little like tough or painful or whatever to do this work in our 40s, 50s, 60s, right? Like there
Yeah.
is a kind of like regret that's um blended in with that. But I think that to bring it back to Glennon, like Fountain of Wisdom, Glennon's podcast. I think she actually quoted Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote the great Eat, Pray, Love, which is this manifesto of freedom, right? And uh, Elizabeth Gilbert said, "There's no such thing as one-way liberation."
Yeah.
And I see it like that's what we see, with that woman walking in her magnificent body down the beach, her magnificent real body. When I teach a mat practice called Alter. That's this fusion of yoga, strength training, ecstatic dance, some Pilates bar, but importantly, ending in meditation. And it's really like I loved. I just started teaching it. I teach it online, but I teach it here in Boulder as well, Colorado, where I now live. And so I'm newly teaching it, right? So people are kind of newly discovering it. And
Right.
I overheard this woman tell a friend about the class. The friend was like, "What is this class?" And she just said, "Breathe big and get weird," which I love.
You're
But
like, I'll
she
take it.
totally, I'm like, bingo. But that student actually in class, she's this like really big breather. She's like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I see the effects of it ripple through the class. Like
Right.
there's no such thing as one-way liberation when you set yourself free and you luxuriate in your body. It gives everybody in your,
That
circle
permission.
permission. Totally. Yeah. And like, sure enough, I notice when she's in class, everyone's breathing like a little bigger, right?
I live in Boston, and there is this little area where these like ducks live. And they all live down by the water. And inevitably, probably like a couple times a day, one duck decides it's time to cross the street. Inevitably. And it's like that one duck. It's like, hey guys,
Hmm.
we're crossing the street. So it's like Susan the breather. It's like people probably have come to your class and you've said, hey, really get down into your lungs and get it all in there. And they're like, I don't really know what that means. And then Susan comes to class and they're like, oh, that's what she means, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like it takes that one duck to be like, we're crossing the street, and everyone else kind of follows along.
Yeah, and I think too, like maybe our first like reaction to maybe especially a woman who's fully embodied
Yeah.
and who I think this is important. It was important for me to like realize the distinction between I had kind of conflated sensuality with sexuality. Like if I heard the word
Yeah,
sensual,
you
I'd
put
be
it
like,
together.
exactly. No, to be sensual is to live in your senses, like to
Yeah,
live in your body, right? And when we see a woman who is deeply sensual, who's embodying herself, who's I mean, I think of it as like letting the divine feminine fully unfold in her, like fully run through her, that it it does even still like I'm awakened to a lot of this stuff and it still can kind of scandalize me a little bit. And
yeah,
then and it takes a minute and then it is this permission, right? Then I'm like,
right,
wait a second, what if I try that? Oh my gosh, it feels so good.
right. Well, if you think about it, not just in a fitness way, we've always, as women, you're too loud, you're too big. And
Yeah.
so like we've always tried, just from, from food, from workouts, try to make ourselves smaller. And just having the like, I'm a loud person. Like my husband tells me all the time, he's like, you're loud. I'm like, I know, and it is what it is, right? I was like, I yell for a living. I'm like, I taught group fitness for 15 years. I'm like, I had to yell. It just like, it's hard to like lower your voice.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think for years, like you said, like we were just told to be small. And so now we're like, you know what? I want to be big. And it's okay.
Yeah. I love this question. How strong can I get? Like
Yeah.
versus how small can I get? How toned can I get? Whatever. How strong can I get? How fast can I get? How
Right.
powerful can I get? How sensually alive can I get? Guess what? All of that needs really good nourishment
Right.
and
Nourishment.
rest. Yeah,
Right.
nourishment, rest, loving myself, like we're not gonna hate ourselves into our strength.
No.
Yeah,
And if hating yourself into whatever it is you've been trying to get to, how's that working out for you? Let's just take a
right.
pause. How is that
Yeah.
working out for you? Because if it's working out, holla. I'm like, I want to see it. Send pictures. I want to see it.
Yeah, it's sure not a long-term strategy, that's for sure.
And
Like, yeah.
and what you said, I really liked what you said about how movement is more about celebratory, more about like, gratitude. Like, hey, I get to, as I
Yeah.
come to my class, I get to move. I get to move. Like it's not like I'm forcing myself to like strap myself to a spin bike for 45 minutes because that's what I've been told to do. It's like, hey, I'm coming to a class from joy, right? Not from obligation.
Yeah, I now think of fitness as, or just my workouts as my way of plugging in. Like
Mm,
it's my recharge. I've I'm gonna go so far as to say at least half of the workouts that I do, I don't feel like doing that day.
yep.
And we've of course never regretted one, right? There's never a workout that you've
Hmm.
regretted because it's it's bringing, I think most importantly, it brings us home to ourselves.
Yep.
It's really now important for me to teach from a place that is offering people a chance to check in with their feelings and actually feel their feelings, like express it. Maybe that's grief, maybe that's rage, maybe that's gratitude, maybe that's joy. But to give ourselves that moment, to like let the feelings run through our whole entire system. If we're not expressing it, guess what? It's living in us.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
And
bubbling in
yeah,
there
so
somewhere.
that's like, and I find that perspective on why to train is a big enough why, right? It's a big enough
Yeah.
why on those days that I don't feel like it. The wanting to be a smaller pant size usually isn't a big enough why, right?
No.
To get us there every single day.
Yeah. And if it is, it's only for, the short term, and the next week you need to be chasing something else to get your tushy
Right.
into the gym. So I was like, we're talking about this. Like, what's like one thing that someone could do today to start to like fall back in love with like our ever-changing bodies, especially at this age?
Yeah. I mean, this is the simplest thing that literally everyone can do. I'm going to do it with us right now. Just put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly and just take a deep breath into your palms. So you inhale and the belly expands, chest expands, and then exhale. And this is just this simple way in 2 or 3 breaths to come home, to
Yeah.
remember that we live in a body and we're not just, I like to think of it as riding the elevator down a floor from our heads, which is our minds, which is kind of where we're usually living and
Yes.
swirling into our bodies. And that even helps me to become aware like, oh, I've been sitting with my legs crossed for half an hour. That's really putting a lot of strain on my hip, or I need to stand up and stretch or whatever. I think that I also really love to think about all the ways that your body has carried you through your life. Very literally, all the ways that you've healed. Like every single time
Yeah.
in your life that you've healed, you've probably healed over 100 times
Mm,
from colds, cuts, muscle strains, broken bones, maybe intense illnesses. Just think about that. Like your body is a miracle machine. Your body
right.
is incredible. And the simple fact that your heart has never stopped beating for you, your
Mm,
lungs have never stopped breathing you, that, when we can kind of shift our relationship from feeling like enemy of our bodies to
mm.
feeling in awe of our bodies or feeling like an ally of our bodies, like this incredible thing that I've been given. I think that's uh, it's so important. And again, we're receiving so many messages constantly that we're not measuring up, that this is probably something we got to do on a daily basis, is come home and just remember how incredible she is.
Right. And they, as the words say, like confidence is an inside job. And so many of us have been looking externally for validation. And it's about time that we finally like came home and we got quiet. And I know for me, that was really hard. Being quiet, listening to what my body had to say was like one of the most, it was hardest and humbling thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. Um, I created a nutrition body. I call it a reset for body and spirit. It's called Energize.
Mm,
And it's a bunch of wisdom on nutrition and on, I think, eating for an optimal to optimize your metabolism, right? So to feel as energized and also as efficient in your digestion and in the fuel that you're giving yourself as possible. But as I was creating this program, I realized that, as important of a piece of all of the kind of like technical knowledge, like nutrition knowledge, is the mindset, right? And
yes.
so it has 28 daily audio meditations that's included in it. So it's a 4-week program. It's a meditation each day. And it was so uh, healing for me to create these meditations and to really ask myself, like, what are the liberating truths that I need to live into that are going to set me free from the limiting beliefs that I've been in
Mm,
around my body my whole freaking life, right? So it's like
yeah,
little, like simple mantras like, thank you, body. And I'm working with you today, right? Which is
right.
so simple. But I think if most women get honest, there's a good chance that we've spent most of our lives feeling like we're at war with ourselves or we're disappointed, right? In our bodies or even like disdaining. And that, I think, just that incredible healing work of, like you said, getting quiet. First of all, acknowledging what are the beliefs that I have about myself that are literally toxic, and how can I reset those and start to practice some different ways of being with myself, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. That is for sure. And so Holly, oh my God, not Holly. Ding, ding, ding. Nicole, I don't even know where Holly came from.
I'll assume it was holler.
Yeah. Um, where can people find this program and where can people connect with you online or somewhere?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. My website is NicoleMeline.com, NicoleMeline. And there I would go to, there's NicoleMeline.com/programs, which just shows you everything, the movement and meditation, altar membership, the Energize program, but then also NicoleMeline.com/energize. You can find out all about Energize if that's calling for you. And then I'm on Instagram, and I've recently started a YouTube channel and
Oh, yay.
TikTok and all the places.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Facebook.
And so I always ask my guests, what's one thing that makes you feel magical?
Ooh, I try to just dance to one song a day.
Ooh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's 5 minutes and it changes my life. It'll
It
change our lives.
It does. I have I still teach group fitness in person and everyone's like,
Uh-huh.
oh, you have such a great playlist. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, I listen to music all the time. And then I was like, I have like 3 songs that if I'm in like a bad mood, like this is like the like bad mood playlist. And they're like, I should have a bad mood playlist. I'm like, oh, it'll change your life.
The hype playlist. Yeah.
Yeah, like bad mood, it'll change your life because like you kind of come in the crappiest mood. I listen to those three songs and I'm like, all right, let's go.
Let's go. Let's feel it all. Yes.
All right, guys, make sure you follow Nicole. Like, this is what I love is that she's like very like we don't have to grind and hustle anymore. Like those days, those are far behind us. And God, who has time anymore? I don't have the time I had in my 20s and 30s. We want to get in, we want to get it done, but I also want to feel my body and not be like I need to be beat myself into submission. So absolutely follow her. The Energize program sounds absolutely amazing. I know I need to slow myself down for a little bit too. But make sure you follow her. And Nicole, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Such a joy. Thank you.